Everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Today, the pattern, can it be rescued? Flemington to host the Cox Plate, a strike in British racing, and a chat with champion jockey-turned-racing executive Claire Lindop. In breeding, a drop in imported European mares, Aussies busy at Arcana, and Inglis's Chris Russell talks to us about yearling inspection season. And in wagering, race club sponsorship, Sky's new appointment, and a pickle bet pushing the envelope. We also have your questions. Tim, always great to have you on board. This discussion around the pattern isn't going anywhere. It's sort of blown up again. I wrote in an article yesterday, it does feel like Groundhog Day about this time last year when this pattern issue sort of blew up. It's been in a state of crisis since 2019. It's sort of things probably can be sourced back to sort of 2011, 2012 when this sort of came about. Any hope that we can get people to sit down and agree on this one, Tim, or is it just the fact that there's always going to be two sides to this argument and that the people that are empowered to make these decisions are always going to pursue their agenda?
Sure. The ratings push would suit, well, certainly Racing New South Wales and Peter Volandi's goals. And I wrote last week about getting Golden Eagle up to Group 1 status, which I would argue it should be, and that would help get world pool attraction and other sort of commingled events and wagering revenue from that. But outside the Group 1s and the big main races, I can't understand the fascination with upgrading Warriors and different things at Kembla Granges, and that if they're not internationally recognised, they have no value to the catalogue or for breeders really. And I don't understand the attraction for PRAs and attracting extra wagering turnover. I can't see that encouraging extra turnover. Personally, I could be wrong, but I just can't see it. And I think there should be some subjectiveness to this, and where a committee would come in using ratings as a guide, but not be all and end all. Because I think the smaller states, WA, SA, need their Group 1 races. They don't. If you use purely ratings, well, even some of the main straight races or main state races shouldn't be, using ratings shouldn't be Group 1s. But we need some subjectiveness to this and a committee, in my view.
Yeah, and I think that part of the challenge is measuring. This is the argument about how you measure performance of horses. And I think the fundamental, as I put in the article yesterday, the fundamental, way to explain this is it's the concept of performance versus contest. And so therefore, if you prevail in a contest against other horses, you get rated a certain way and it's seen as a certain way. Performances. Now, in sport in general, we celebrate Olympic champions more than we celebrate world record holders. So on a ratings basis, a world record holder is the highest rated athlete. But if that world record holder turns up in the Olympics and doesn't perform, that sees them in the public eye as different. Now, there's two reasons why we use the pattern, right? Two main reasons. The first one is obviously ascribing bloodstock value in terms of finding the best horses, identifying and moving forward for breeding selection and breeding purchases and whatever else. And that's straightforward. A Group 1 winner at stud, be it male or a stallion, will have more value than a Group 2 winner, Group 3 winner, as a rule. It's not always works out that way, but as a rule, that will work out. The second one is about an engagement platform for broader people to know that there's a Group 1 race. Right, so we've got 76 Group 1s in Australia. I don't think there's many people in Australia that disagree that there is that's too many. There's 26 in Japan. I think there's America's got 108, but it's got more racing, I suppose. The ability to have the best of the best sort of come through and have the public to understand, this is a Group 1 race. It's important. It's great. We now have Group 1 races pretty much from this weekend, pretty much right through to the end of November now, Tim. And so the thought of it being a peak season has sort of been diminished by the fact that, getting that Group 1 imprimatur on it helps marketing and helps all those things. Now, there's been talk about super Group 1s, or, whatever we're going to have. I think someone messaged us this morning, said Group 0s. There's a framework there to get people to engage with racing based upon elite level racing. No one wants to market a Group 2 as the challenge. Nobody sits there and goes, well, it's a Group 2 race this weekend. You don't see the MRC saying, we had the Group 2 PB Lions. How it's great to have Group 2 racing at Caulfield. This is the issue that they've got, but it has to be more about the structure of the sport than it is about marketing, and that's probably the challenge. Tim, I want to put this question to you. What does it say about Australian racing that we can't work this out? that there is this political division between how we see racing moving forward. I think it sort of sits at the heart of those who believe that the fabric of the sport is important and those who believe that there's a different way moving forward of the way we do things. Do you agree with me on that?
Yes, and it proves again, there's numerous examples where Racing Australia doesn't have any say in the two major states, Racing New South Wales and Racing Victoria, have veto over the rest of the states. So if one of them disagrees, nothing happens, and that's where we are at the moment. Where outside, there's a lot of issues that could be solved or at least improved on a national level that aren't, because of this bickering to do with patterns and all sorts of different things. And racing's the loser at the moment because of that.
Yeah, and I think, Racing Australia has probably proven itself, the structure of Racing Australia has proven itself incapable of dealing with this particular issue. And that's why the committee is seen as a solution, because you're trying to take that out of that political sphere and make it as a committee. But again, it's about who controls the power and the structure of racing going forward. And that's a bit of fight in Australia at the moment. Moving on now, Tim, and Cox Plate moving to Flemington was announced this morning, obviously for just 1 year. This is not a golden eagle move. This is a 1-year move because, hopefully a 1-year move from the Moonee Valley's point of view. 21 months is the build timeline for the new Moonee Valley, which is cutting up right up against that, 2027 Cox Plate. But what we do know is the 2026 Cox Plate we held at Flemington. 6 months ago, we reported on the straight that it was going to Caulfield. I'm adamant that was going to be the case. Something happened along the line there somewhere where there was a disconnect, and Flemington got themselves back into the race. But it's an interesting one. I would think from a racing purist point of view that people will be relatively happy with this. And yes, you might be able to get 60, 70,000 to Cox Plate Day if you get a good field. And you get the right sort of marketing around it. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because there's obviously a bit of a competition here, or a bit of a competitive tension here between the MRC providing their own great 4 days a week later and what goes on with the Cox Plate.
Well, it's interesting. You think that most racing fans and punters would be in favour of Flemington. I actually thought Caulfield would be better, just more in line with Moonee Valley. Was such a unique track. It's completely different to the 2,000 metres at Flemington, which, or the old McKinnon or Champion Stakes, it'll be on the final day of the carnival. Caulfield, tighter track. Just a different race, but I'm still a Cox Plate, still a great race. And, maybe because it's not because it is at Flemington, maybe some other horses will go, I'll go to Flemington, or trainers will choose to go to Flemington instead of where Moonee Valley. They just don't think their horses suited that track, perhaps.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether what happens with the 3-year-old contingent, because obviously that's been a key aspect of the Cox Plate over time, and whether at Moonee Valley, there's probably a perception that a 3-year-old can get away with getting to 2,000 metres for the first time, and especially if they go forward in those races, and whether they'll see Flemington as a more sturdy test. And now we'll have the Turnbull, which is set weights and penalties, but not far off weight for age, as a Group 1 race. Let me do a math here. 3 weeks later into a Cox Plate at the same venue, 2 weeks later into a 2,000 metre Champion Stakes at the same venue. So look, no system is ideal, but I think the uniqueness of the Cox Plate will be a little bit lost for that year. But hopefully, you never know. Like we saw last year with the Cox Plate, an extraordinary performance can come out of nowhere, and it could be an iconic moment. Moving on now to an international story now. Tim, British Racing announced this week they'll go on a 1-day strike on Wednesday, September 10th. 4 meetings will not be held that day. They'll be moved to other days, so there'll be a little bit of, I guess. Yeah. But I guess it's a statement back towards the government and those making decisions around this possibility, and the high possibility, that the tax around betting in UK will be lifted from 15% to 21%, which will put it on the same level as other online betting platforms, and other basically makes racing indistinct from a taxation point of view from other gambling in the UK. It's an interesting one, this action. It has been a little bit divisive. Those in the sports, in the corporate betting industry, corporate bookmaking industry, have not supported it. There's been some saying it's a bit naive to expect this is going to make a difference, and whatever else. It is on the eve of the St Leger festival at Doncaster, which will be significant because Keir Starmer's got the Prime Minister's got an attachment to that, was there last year and all this sort of stuff. Do political actions like this have the desired effect here, Tim, or does it actually end up punishing the industry itself?
I think there's two sides. I think desperate times, desperate measures. I think whether it'll make a difference, I'm not convinced by that, but I think they needed to make a statement. And what was interesting, from a media perspective, is they took, and I would argue it was the right decision, they took it to the mainstream political press first rather than, the trade publications like Racing Posts, because, talking to the same audience. They needed to get to the general public and the politicians about this is why it's important. And hopefully, I think they're going to go to, 10 Downing Street or whatever, and, on the next month, hopefully the politicians at least listen. I've read with interest that the local MP for Newmarket was on the racing side, understandably, given the whole town functions through racing. So, I think they needed to do something. Whether it works, time will tell. But, they needed to make a big statement that sort of dragged on for too long. They probably dragged their heels a little bit too early, or didn't do enough early. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens after this protest. But, desperate times, desperate measures, as I say.
Yeah, the BHA have estimated that that will cost the racing industry around £66 million a year, at least, if that would happen, with obviously knock-on effects from there. So, I mean, I think there's probably a little bit of parallels to some of the stuff that's happening here in Australia around taxation and point of consumption and those types of things as well, Tim. So it's a bit of a global issue, and racing's desire, and I think, requirement to be seen as different from other gambling mediums is really important. So we'll watch that one with interest. And we are delighted to be joined by Claire Lindop, whose extraordinary riding career saw her win 4 Group 1 races, multiple Adelaide premierships, and blaze a trail for so many jockeys out there. Claire now works as the Industry Development and Training Officer for Racing South Australia. Claire, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here with you, Bren and Tim.
So, Claire, it's been 7 years since you've brought your highly successful riding career to an end. Talk to us about the challenge for you about stepping back from being a day-to-day jockey and doing what you're doing to sort of, I guess, the next stage of your career.
Oh, I still gloss over how long I've been retired for. I say I think about 3 or 4 years ago when people ask me. So that's a bit of a realization. Time flies, doesn't it? 7 years. So, I mean, I'll probably reflect back. People always say you're a long time retired. And I probably do think maybe I could have ridden for a couple more years. And you kind of think, it always comes in your mind when you hear about other people making comebacks in whatever sport. I do love riding horses still. But yeah, I think one of the deciding factors in me wanting to retire, I was coming into my 40s, and the median retirement age for jockeys is proven to be 40. And I was thinking, well, do I still want to be riding at 50? And I just saw a great interview with Linda Meach recently about, do I want to just be an also-ran jockey at the races? The ego starts talking. So I'm thinking, actually, I could look now and have another 20-year career in another profession, or different avenue in racing. I guess that was why I guess for the past 7 years I've been doing a whole bunch of different things. Yeah.
Yeah, and so how did you go about, like, just reassessing that or working out what was next? I mean, would you have something clear in your mind about what you want to do?
I thought I did. And then I was kind of left with, okay, what am I actually going to do now? And I guess for me, I live in a great part of South Australia. I live in the Glenelg, Brighton area, which is close to Morpheville Racecourse. And I've lived here since I moved to Adelaide, around this area. So I moved to Adelaide in 1999. And I've managed to bump into the local mayor, Amanda Wilson. She's still our mayor now in Old Fast Bay. And got chatting to her, and she suggested I stand for to be a local elected member in the area of Seacliff Ward that I lived in Holdfast Bay, and I didn't know what else to do, and I thought that sounds like a really great idea, and it's been an incredible journey. A lot of professional development for me. Alongside of that, I've been to TAFE, and I've done some other professional development networking, different workshops and classes, and sort of led to getting out of the racing bubble a little bit, meeting a whole bunch of new people. I'm pretty much a member of every sporting club within the Glenelg area, that's sort of 10 kilometres of coastline. There's 4 surf clubs, so I'm a member of all of them, and a whole different sporting arrangements. So it's been really good to get out of the racing bubble for that as well and meet new people.
Claire, how you obviously in your current role and just general life liaise with a lot of jockeys and ex-jockeys, how difficult is it for them to sort of, when they do retire, and sadly quite often there's a lot that it's forced upon them, that they they might have left school at 15, and I know things have changed a little bit now, but they don't have that education or just that outside view of the world to move on from race riding into a different vocation.
Yeah, I think I left school at 15 and I didn't know anything else. And I probably got lucky with, I do come from, I've had a great family network of support, and education's always been really valued in our family. My dad was a teacher at Deakin University in Warrnambool. My mum was a TAFE teacher as well. So, I went back to TAFE in my 40s and I didn't think anything of doing that. I know that some people might find that a little bit hard to do. But yeah, I don't really feel like it's funny. I actually have the people who have reached out to me from racing, but very rarely do I speak to any jockeys. And I don't have that many ex-jockeys as friends. So it's funny when you say that, there must be a bit of a networking, and no, there's not really. And I wonder if, I guess because it's a bit of a niche occupation, there's not really a roadmap of, what to do out of the industry. And most people ride until, basically their body can't do it anymore for various reasons. But probably I've actually still got some really good girlfriends that I keep in touch with. So Alana Williams in Perth, we've always been really good friends. Alana Sampson when she rode, and we probably were very much similar riders. Her in Western Australia, myself in South Australia, doing the same thing. Now I'm going to share in a horse over there in Perth with Grant and Alana. And Ziggy Carr in Tasmania, we were always really good friends, and I've now got a 10% share in a little filly down there in Tasmania with her. And Christine Bulls and a few others in Victoria I've always been really good friends with. So you do have that networking of jockeys, but, as I said, there's not a lot of, I guess, out of the sport, and it definitely does affect, I think you hear about it all the time from sports people. You sort of come out from being, I guess, in a sport which values you every day, you're rewarded by wins, or you're sort of, kept in the focus and conversation, and then all of a sudden racing so fast it moves straight on again. I should actually say there's been quite a few racehorse trainers who probably reach out to me, and I keep in touch with more than probably the jockeys, because that's just the nature of the beast. Consequently, I go to the races now, and slightly different role, obviously, with Racing South Australia, but other jockeys in the jockeys room I didn't ride with and they don't know me at all. So it's quite funny.
Yeah, just going to ask you about your current role, Claire. I mean, you've been in that role for about 4 years now, industry development and training officer. We're assuming that's sort of like about developing pathways for people and trying to help people through the racing industry. I mean, has that been a passion of yours, that you've been able to sort of execute on, to sort of see young people come into the industry and get their opportunities that they really sort of deserve and really want?
Yeah, this was a newly created role. I saw the advert to Racing SA and applied for the role. I felt like it was prudent for me. It's a very broad role. I still been there 4 years, and I'm still creating different pathways into the industry and trying to actually work with different training organisations to get horse handling of any kind into. If you don't know how to handle a horse at all, it's really hard to get that basic training to get a job with a racehorse trainer. And racing stables, they're definitely still the entry level stable hand roles, and that could take you onto track work or jockey or onto racehorse trainer, or even working with club and administration and seeing all those pathways. And generally always come back to understanding industry. We have very specific terminology, lingo, all that kind of stuff, and really having that background of working in a racing stable environment is probably the best way about it. I am passionate about that. I mean, I kind of fell into racing. I don't come from a racing background at all. As I mentioned, I did come from Warrnambool, which is a bit of a horse racing area, but I fell into, I had a pony, did some pony club, and fell into working for a racehorse stable. It's one of the only industries we can earn money, working with horses. Any other equestrian sports, it costs a lot of money to get involved with. And that's one of the things I do now, is I do, like Racing SA, do engage with the Pony Club South Australia. We help sponsor a lot of the events. We have a welfare side, which obviously helps with retiring racehorses into off-the-track events. And I guess there's a little bit of a target audience to show people that working in that industry is definitely, you can take your passion of horses into a job. And I guess for me also, it's a bit of a social license. If everyone who handles horses has base level of training, or, you can say that everyone who handles a racehorse has a certificate 3 in stable hand. That's a great thing to be able to say to people from the outside looking at our industry as well.
Claire, it is a very labour-intensive industry, specifically training and the stable staff required, track work riders, and getting staff is a difficult thing. Is there particularly with the unusual hours, are there things that you believe should be changed or things that can be done to attract more staff to the industry?
It is a bit of a labour of love. Look, it'd be always, the conversation about early morning starts is obviously there. There's pluses and minuses to be had, even attracting staff. One of the things I say to school kids when I go around, I said, who likes to see sunrises? And I get a few hands up and go, well, good, because you'll be seeing a lot of them. But that's the same in a lot of animal industries. Like, you've got to feed your animals. Doesn't matter what animal, what industry it is. If they have animals, they all need breakfast early. Perhaps some of the crazy hours they're starting in some of the metropolitan tracks needs to be addressed. I think waking up with an alarm at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. is pretty unhealthy for people, full stop. Doesn't matter what job they actually do, whether they're riding or whether just working with the horses. But yeah, horses need to be fed early. So, you probably still need your workforce to be at work at, 6 a.m. You see the Europeans model, even if they work till 12 o'clock, they're still there at 6 a.m. So it's still early mornings. And I guess, you got a big team, got to get them work before the track maintenance starts if you work at a facility. Some of the properties that seem to have now an afternoon shift or a longer day shift. But there's also a lot of attractiveness in having that shift work and getting it done. And other people could, people move on to either going to the races. They might have another job as a farrier or a barrier attendant or something else they do during the day, as well as working as a stable hand. So it's that hard balance. But I personally think it comes down to the fact that we just need more staff. Like, that way the job won't be that hard. Like, if you have, we try and work on a rule of thumb for every 4 horses, there should be 1 full-time employee. And, you'll see family businesses sort of, with a dozen horses with 2 of them, and it starts getting that little bit challenging. So, that sort of building up a stable that is going really well, like young trainers perhaps getting, 6 or 7 horses and then trying to expand to getting a dozen or 20 horses, they need that extra hand and extra staff. So that's where I'm trying to step in and show them actually can employ particularly part-time, even school-based trainees, which is where I guess where I'm hoping a little bit of the Department of Education. And we actually have a school-based traineeship, which helps you achieve your 11 and 12. So they are showing students that you can stay in school and get your 12, but still get paid in a job working with horses. That's probably one of the biggest pushes I'm trying to do. I think it's happening pretty much everywhere in Australia. I talked to the other PRAs and the roles, like we all have, I could have town halls they pull on to catch up with Racing Australia, and every state's actually looking at doing the same type of qualifications. And it would be good to see a little bit more uniformity between all of the states. Some states have different licensing requirements. To be a racehorse trainer, do you have to have a certain racehorse trainer's qualification or not? Jockey is about the only one that's universal. And I feel like we could even do a little bit more in that space as well. And, farrier accreditation, barrier training, all that kind of stuff. And even equine vets thinking a little bit on the ground as well, and sort of show a little bit more a training and pathway into that. And probably the same for stewards. Even in our integrity department, you see advertising now for stewards roles and they actually can't fill them. So some training in that space, and how do you actually get education for that prior to gaining the actual job. That's sort of what I'm trying to look at now, and I think everyone's in the same boat.
It's been especially that sort of, I guess, at the top level, but it's been a fairly male-dominated industry over time. Obviously, there's been a massive change, even in your time, in terms of jockeys and stable hands and stuff, in terms of that. Is the industry doing a good enough job, do you feel, Claire, of getting highly credentialed women to be involved, or even younger women to be involved through that?
Yeah.
Are you seeing that change?
That's interesting because I feel like definitely in riding, definitely jockeys have started to be see all the apprentices now we're seeing in most of the states are majority female. But it'd be good to see some of the, I guess, the females at the other end, but it's probably, I feel like it could be better a matter of time because we've seen some really professional female riders or horse trainers now. Are they going to get into admin? We've seen a few male jockeys getting into administration or different roles like that and finding other roles, jockey coaching, or whether it be working for racing authorities as, like Darren Gouchy, for example, in Victoria. Here in South Australia, we have Dean Pettit as jockey coach. And looking at stewards as well, we do have quite a few female young cadet stewards coming through as well. And perhaps at the top administration and looking at boards and CEOs, that might be the next area where it would be good to see some more female representation. But funnily enough, Bren, in the jockey and the riding area, we actually struggle to get young boys. So I actually the most, like I said, I guess the target audience or the easy audience is pony club kids, and they tend to be young female riders. So I actually think it's a bit of a challenge now to get young boys into our sport, and I guess one of the ways I'm looking to perhaps broaden that is showing groundskeeper roles, and I guess sports turf management sort of side of our industry is predominantly being men as well. We do actually have one girl at Strath who's actually won an award recently for her groundskeeping and turf training award, which is fantastic. So, not to say I think it's just a matter of trying to keep the industry pathways open to anyone and available for everyone. I guess that's probably trying to get it right in the first place. Anyone can excel.
Claire, racing can be I think it's a fantastic career option because just the travel it can provide. You can work overseas, lots of different opportunities that probably many other careers don't. And you're a great example of that with what provided you. How have you found working on the other side? It is an industry where punters are for punters and administrators are probably for administrators and jockeys likewise. How have you found it jumping the fence?
Oh, that's a good question because it did feel like that, like I was working for the enemy. Yeah, because
Yeah.
jockeys are generally always against stewards and you kind of stick up for each other in the stewards room and things like that. So you're right. But I guess I don't really get involved in, I guess, the a steward side of racing SA, like the umpires of our sport. But I do still think like a jockey, and sometimes, we're laughing, once a jockey, always a jockey, always defending them or, sticking up for them and that kind of side of it. So that was interesting mindset change. Yeah, I do really miss, I was thinking about like, if I think about the opportunities that racing has given me, it's been incredible traveling, pretty much ridden every state in Australia, traveled overseas, which has been amazing. It does open a lot of doors for you. And even now, you know, because of the career I've had, I've been asked to do things which I would have never got the opportunity to do. For example, I love being on the Australian Racing Hall of Fame selection panel. We're thrilled to be involved with that. And here I am in a panel arguing with Bruce McAvaney about whether we should induct this horse or this person into the Hall of Fame. It's like sometimes I pinch myself, like how did I get into this role? I remember we were talking about Winx and Black Caviar and into the Hall of Fame and things like that. And I remember arguing a little bit, just off topic slightly, having an argument about which one's better. And it's like this brave Australian putters conversation about who's better, Winx or Black Caviar. And I guess probably because I'm Black Caviar camp because I rode against Black Caviar. And I remember clearly in a race with Black Caviar and Luke Nolan, for example, as a rider, when you're in a race and you're watching a horse, you can always tell where the jockey's going to go. There's always sort of like they move their hands or they click the horse up or they gather the reins. But Luke had no tell. Like Black Caviar just sailed away from me. And I remember riding, half shaking my head going, no wonder you can't keep in touch with it. Like it was just blew my mind. And I must imagine, obviously never rode against Winx, but or in a race with her, I could imagine, the other jockeys would be feeling the same. And I think about how, Hugh Bowman felt or how Luke Nolan felt riding those horses. And as much as it's exciting, it's also nerve-wracking to imagine riding with that pit of fear in your stomach, like if I stuff this up. Because, each jockey has probably had the situation where you're riding, a favourite and you get beat and magnify that by a zillion times and you're riding something like, that caliber. So it's like your dream to be, travel around the world and ride these horses. But it's also when you're doing it, you're going, why do I wish this upon myself? So that's interesting. But racing, I mean, that's the whole reason why I love it too, isn't it? The next horse that you're involved with, and I've got a couple of shares of horses now, and I'm on the other side of the fence as an owner as well. You've sort of that dream of getting into a big race and being involved with it. It's what sucks us all in.
How do you go being an owner, especially with, you mentioned Alana and giving advice how it's trained, or the jockey that might have not ridden it to the best of advantage? How do you go managing that?
Well, my two horses with jockeys haven't raced yet. They're both young horses, so I'll let you know. You can have me back on for that one. I have got a couple of shares, obviously, with Andrew Lewis, who is Liam McDonald's, is Liam McDonald's son-in-law. So that's a connection with the stable there, and I've got a couple of shares there, and I do tell Andrew what I think all the time, but he takes it on the chin. I don't try and tell jockeys instructions because I just feel like I'd cloud the instructions a little bit. So I try and stay out of the mounting out a little bit too much. I don't get a little bit too opinionated.
I mean, I guess I was going to ask you this question, but I think I know the answer. I mean, you still miss your days being a jockey. Clearly, it's a time you recall very fondly, and your passion for racing was developed through that time. And you had a amazing seat, didn't you? You were able to create your own history. You won great races. You broke ground. You rode in Melbourne Cups. You did the things that you did. For you, that must still feel like it's another time, but it must be something that still sort of burns within you to go, that was a pretty amazing time of my life.
It absolutely was. Yeah, certainly. I had some amazing thrills. I got to ride particularly in the spring carnival time, the Adelaide carnival time, and there was nothing better than taking on the top jockeys when it came to Adelaide as well. But like finally in my backyard and my comfort zone, I get to take them on. So, winning a couple of that Goodwood and winning our Adelaide Cup were always really special moments for me. But I guess you try and strive to be the best in whatever job you do. And so being able to compete at Melbourne springtime and actually win some of those Group 1s, it's really special to me now. And I guess at the time you don't really understand, you're just always on to the next one, next goal. Where's that horse going next? Trying to be successful. And I probably never really enjoyed it as much. Now on reflection now, I think about, I guess what it meant, particularly also in looking through how you sort of watch, through in the fullness of time, you can look back and see, me riding in the Melbourne Cup and then, riding some winners and then Michelle Payne win the Melbourne Cup and then, Jamie Carr doing what she's doing, and so on and so forth. It's female riders now, it's not even a conversation, is it? Which I think is absolutely fantastic. So, I don't really, at the time, I don't look back and think I was trailblazer as such. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but were you aware at the time of your profile you developed, not only as a leading female jockey, but as a leading jockey, and that people did count on you. I mean, I can tell you, truth, my mum backed every horse that you rode on a Saturday, and she'd say, "Did what horse was Claire riding?" I mean, that meant something to people, and when you have that connection, I mean, it must be hard as a young person coming through, realizing that what what you're doing actually has a lot of meaning for a lot of people.
Um, yeah, probably wasn't really aware of it, to that extent, I suppose. And, I probably never, it's funny because jockeys, although we're all predominantly a little bit show offy because we enjoy riding and performing and, we love winning races. That's what we do. There's nothing like that thrill of the horse just fluttering out and, you have that connection with the animal and you see those horses, particularly when you're working with them every day and you see them win, it's really satisfying. But I never really got comfortable with the media side of it and the
Yeah.
headlines, and I still don't actually do media interviews that well now. Not like they do now. Oh my gosh, they're so polished, aren't they? They're also used to having cameras in their faces, this generation, and they're always recording even interviews at track work. And as soon as they get off the horse in the mounting yard, they've got interviewed now back to the owners. So they're a lot more used to doing interviews now. But it used to really annoy me a little bit, and I was like, no, I'm not a female jockey. I'm just a jockey. Like, it doesn't have to be like a big deal about it. And I probably didn't use that platform particularly well. Probably used it more now, to be honest. Yeah. And like I said, I've managed to have that platform into a few different areas and take that wanting to succeed attitude into out of racing activities. But yeah, I probably didn't really wear the female tag that well when I was riding.
But you probably would fair to say too that being a public figure was not that comfortable with you anyway. You're still that sort of humble girl from Warrnambool sort of attitude that being in that space, so being that sort of profile, did that ever really fit with you? Did you ever really feel like that was something you go, okay, well, people know who I am or whatever else? Like, is that something you ever got comfortable with?
Well, there's a couple of things I'm really proud of, and that's and I felt like I've earned, and that's particularly having the recognition of being in the South Australian Racing Hall of Fame. And also having a race name here in South Australia, Claire Lindop Stakes now, which is, I like the fact that one day people won't even, roll off the tongue and be like, oh, it's running the Lindop on Saturday. And they won't even really put two and two together. It just becomes part of the racing here in South Australia. So I love that. But you're right. I always feel like, oh, I don't really want to do that interview. Why do people want to speak to me? I don't really want to be a Bears trailblazer, or example. So it is really hard. And I see that a little bit now in some of the riders. And I kind of get both sides of that now, more so than I did when I was riding, because obviously racing, we are trying to get eyeballs on our sport, trying to promote it. I see that a little bit with Rochelle Milnes here in South Australia. She won the Adelaide Cup this year. She's won the premiership. But she's really only been riding for 2 years for bugger, and she's like, "Oh, do I have to do the interview? Like, why do people want to interview me?" And so I can kind of see that a little bit, and it can be a little bit hard mentally to deal with that, and can be detrimental to your career. That tall popper syndrome as well. Like, people are like, "Oh, she's doing another interview. Yeah, I think she's amazing now." Not Rochelle, but just in general. And so you've got to be able to balance that. And I think that's why it's so important to have, your mentors in place. And I guess in the case of Racing SA, they've gone really, and most states the same. They're really trying to have that apprentice school academy. You've got a careers advisor, you've got sports psychologists, you've got your jockey coaches, you've got people in place that you can speak to and lean on in those situations. So you've got to be really aware of that. But racing itself, I do feel like, marketing people, whether it's that job of marketing, doesn't matter what industry it is, there's a lot of turnover. And so you're always getting someone, new person going, "Oh, let's have this idea, let's have that idea." And you feel like as a writer, "Oh, can we just, realistically get on with our jobs?" Yeah, it's hard.
Claire, giving that advice, I guess, to, a Rochelle Milnes or anyone coming through, and there was certainly social media when you back end of your career, definitely, but it's probably gone to another level and different style again the last 7 years. How do the young jockeys in particular, and there's trainers cop it too, but jockeys managing that, I guess, that profile, or that, not necessarily abuse, but just, you can search your own name on social media now and, comments about your rides or whatever.
Yeah, I don't really have the best advice on that because I didn't handle it well. But I think probably one of the things, I think you just have to try and you see it now with a lot of the footballers, right? So they have another hobby or they get involved in something else and have a bit more perspective. And I think I've got better perspective now. I've stopped writing than I did when I was writing because, people don't even follow you as much as what you follow yourself. So no one knows you've had, a day at Strathalbyn today, for example, you didn't ride a winner and you're fronting up on Saturday, you think you haven't ridden a winner. I drove one bout on Wednesday, never try and Joe Public doesn't even know you rode on Wednesday. So I think we just get really bogged down in one comment or one person's, snide right because they lost some money on you today. And then you go to the next race meeting and you're a bit nervous. You're like, "Oh, I've had 8 outs and I'm on," and so it gets into your head. So I always feel like the best advice I can give is have something else, that little bit of, get away from, just having it going around in your head, that mental kind of trap. And, probably a big example of that is Jamie Carr, who has her own pony. She's going rides and sort of show jumping and stuff and has the farm and just gets out a little bit away from always hearing the media. And it's very easy to look at someone like Jamie, though, who's an outstanding rider and just natural. But yeah, I think if you're sort of, working at your craft and working hard at your craft, you really take to heart what people might say. So sometimes having that extra little bit of an outlet or a hobby, which seems funny because we're all a bit time poor when you're working in the racing industry, but just having that little bit of an outlet away. And for me, my family was pretty big with that too. Like, I remember when I rang my sister one day, I said, "Oh, I'm riding in the G1 today. I'm a bit nervous." And she goes, "What's the G1?" Like, she didn't know what it meant. So, she was like, "Oh, whatever," of, telling me about her kids and her worries. So it just sort of, put things in perspective a little bit.
Claire, it's thanks so much for your time. It's been great to chat to you. Like, I think that, for whatever you've done, your passion for your career, you've done an amazing job in your writing career, an extraordinary job as we've spoken about. But I think what's to come is really exciting as well. And to have people like you involved in the heart of the industry, I think is really crucial. We have a lot of jockeys over the years that leave a bit jaded and whatever else. And you had a bit of time away and did your own thing and sort of came back in. And having talked to you previously about your passion for your current job and your drive to learn more and all that sort of stuff. I think it's it's great to see people like you still heavily involved in the industry and really keen to sort of shape the next generation. So thanks so much for your time. All the best, and thanks a lot.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
The following segment is brought to you by Darley. Let's talk about what makes a stallion stand out. First, the pedigree. By a champion sire, out of a Group 3 winning Street Cry mare, and that Danehill Street Cry cross that's produced the likes of Farnan and Animo. Now the performance. Silver Slipper winner, Todman winner, runner-up in the Golden Slipper. But here's the clincher. He trained on, came back at 3, won the Vane, and then the Newmarket. When you put it all together, it's hard to argue. Cylinder, standing at Darley. Tim, interested to read your excellent story, or excellent 7 days in a breeding newsletter this week about the decline in European imported mares. Now, it's a very different story. We've had a lot about the European imports coming into Australia, primarily geldings coming to target our, distance races, Group 1 races, etc. But what we're seeing, this is a very different trend. I mean, when you look at this, and you've done a bit of analysis in that newsletter this week, what do you see is happening here, and why we're seeing less imported mares into Australia for breeding purposes?
Well, I think there's a few points to this. I think the cost of acquiring them, you don't want to, if you're going all that way to invest in a quality mare, you have to stump up and get a nice mare. You don't want to bring second tier mares. Even I think those people a few years ago sent okay mares, but not top shelf to Frankels and bringing them out, and did very well. I think those days are over. So there's that element to it. The currency exchanges and is on the Australian side, or the Aussie dollar doesn't buy as much as it used to. And also, I think, and admittedly, there's not many US mares that have been brought in or touched down and lodged with the stud book as yet. But we've had Wild Rule, Switzerland out of American mares, quite a bit of success out of yearlings or racehorses out of American mares the last few seasons. So I think people have sort of turned to that direction. John Muir's done that for a long time. Newgate and SF did quite well out of that. But also, again, the US dollar is very strong, so it makes it quite prohibitive to go and buy too many. That's why I think the numbers have dropped.
And Tim, speaking of Europe, Aussies were busy buying at Arcana this week. You chatted to Jim Clark, who was involved in a couple of purchases over there, and what was a pretty hot European sale.
It was, again, only a small sale, I guess. It's select sales, so a lot of quality there, but those big players, Ammo Racing, and what's interesting, Godolphin was a leading buyer. Whether that's a sign, whether they'll re-enter the Australian market, I doubt. Hopefully we can speak to Andy Mackiff about that one day. But Godolphin was prominent. I think they spent €8 million, a lot of money. And then the Australians, or Jim Clark, bought two yearlings, and certainly with Bjorn Baker, the half to Arapaho, it's interesting. They're not going to bring the colt straight down. They've done that in the past with other European yearlings, and just Jim thought that, I guess, adapting to the Australian conditions straight away wasn't suiting the horses, so they're going to have them trained in Ireland, or have the horse trained in Ireland, see how they go. How he goes, and bring him out then. So it's an interesting exercise. If you can get it right, Russian Camelot's a little bit different. He was brought down as a yearling, or as an unraced horse, and he won Group 1s, and it started, and his progeny just starting to hit their straps in the 3-year-old season. You expect him to kick on like he did.
Yeah, it is interesting, that sort of contrast between the European fortunes, I suppose. In some ways, we're buying those horses out here, and otherwise we're not breeding with them.
Joining us this week is New South Wales Bloodstock Operations Manager Chris Russell from Inglis. Chris, welcome back to Straight Talk.
Morning, guys. How are you?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I believe you've just been on the road with your Inglis colleagues, inspecting yearlings across, all over the countryside, but certainly the Hunter Valley. And on Tuesday, I think you spent all day at Arrowfield inspecting at least 230 horses. That's a big day at the office, and I'm sure you would have seen a lot of interesting horses that'll be potential sale toppers, or certainly good horses next year.
Yeah, no, it was a big day at Arrowfield. Looked at around 230 horses. So a lot of nice schnitzels, and the Autumn Suns and Hitotsus and Morrises, a typical band, a smattering of outside horses too. But they do it so well to get through 230 in, I think we started at 8 o'clock and we're done just before 4. Everything's caught and led. They do it fantastically.
On Schnitzel, it will be his second last crop. They sold as well as they ever have this year, and certainly at Easter and Magic Millions. There's some great pedigrees, no doubt, but still great quality yearlings there that you saw.
Yeah, he's obviously, we looked at, I think, just over 20 schnitzels there, and it just reinforces what a loss he's going to be to the industry. He throws such a good sort, and a lot of them are full relations to good horses. You just know how good he is, and he's a horse that's irreplaceable. So the last crop we'll look at of those will be next year, and be a sad day when there's no more schnitzels to offer through the sales rings.
When you're sort of looking at these horses, Chris, and you're sort of assessing them year to year, I mean, how do you compare crops? How do you work it out? How do you sit there? Is there a moment where you sort of look at one another and go, actually, the quality's a bit better this year? Or is there a sense, because you're looking at so many yearlings, it must be hard to sort of process it all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose it's probably more interesting listening to the stud managers. They might have a very good season where everything's green and it takes, managing feed. And, then you can have your dry years where some farm managers actually prefer that because they can really monitor what intake the horses are getting in terms of feed and stuff. And, that then affects x-rays at the other end. So, in terms of us looking at them, there's no great difference we find year to year, but I think it's, the farms are so professional in the way they manage what the horses are getting depending on what the conditions are like.
Chris, we're always looking for the next superstar stallion, to replace the Schnitzels and Invincible still going and Written Tycoon. But the first season sort of quite captivating. You would have seen, we've seen a smattering of weanlings, but the Anamos and the Congos, Jacanos, and I'm sure you would have seen some Hitotsus as well. Anything that sort of stood out or perhaps surprised you, the types they're leaving?
Yeah, Hitotsu, obviously, he's fresh in the mind, having done Arrowfield in the last couple of days. They're really nice horses, the Hitotsus. They're, he himself had a couple of starts as a 2-year-old, but obviously his 3-year-old career and onwards, he was, just a superstar. But looking at a few of them, wouldn't shock me if they went a little bit earlier. Good strength to them, plenty of good quality and things. So I quite like the Hitotsus. Animo, obviously, in this crop is the real talk horse. We know how good he is. They sold very well through the weanling sales, and there's very good sorts. You don't go to a farm like an Arrowfield and look at a heap of Animos obviously standing at Darley, and they don't go to the yearling sales. So you can get a real good guide on the Hitotsus in one day, seeing a lot of them, but the Animos, they're sort of spread here and there. But very nice horses, and he'll be very well received. The team did Newgate, so they would have seen a fair few in the Congos. The ones I've seen, I've really liked. Yes, so it's always exciting seeing the first season horses, and look forward to seeing how they're going to prep up for our yearling sales next year.
It's been a tougher year for stallion farms, contracting the foal crops down a little bit, and some mare owners are decreasing their numbers and pulling out altogether. But you're talking to a lot of these breeders day to day. You're out and about talking to people. I mean, what's the vibe amongst the industry at the moment about sort of where things are at?
Yeah, it's pretty much, it reflects how it is in the yearling sales. The top end of town is still very strong. The good stones, the super commercial stones are all booked. The Ole Kirks or the Too Darn Hots, and you couldn't get a nomination for, we'll cross Too Darn Hot, but you couldn't get a mare into Ole Kirk if you wanted now. Horses like that. So the top end of town, is still gung ho. But you talk to a few of the stallion managers, and you talk about those horses at the more affordable level, and I think a few breeders are probably just sitting on their hands a little bit. They'll wait and see their mare foals, what the foal's like. Do they want to go again? There's obviously that little bit of trepidation from the middle to the bottom end of the market, which we're seeing, and that's probably filtering through now to the breeders. But the top end of town's very strong still.
Competition to get the elite horses into the yearling sales, Magic Millions and NZB will be, probably either been to the farms or be following suit pretty quickly. How do you go about convincing them that, Inglis is the right sale, and placement is so important because, yes, you're competitive with those other auction houses, but you need those breeders to get a return to keep reinvesting as well.
Oh, definitely. And that sort of makes our role a little bit trickier, I suppose. Of the 5 majors, so to speak, in Australia and New Zealand, we've got 3 of them with Classic, Premier and Easter. So, we're looking at every horse we see, we've got to try and match it up into our system where we think it would suit best. So that's certainly comes, with its challenges. And then, the other 2 sales, obviously very good sales. So, but all we can do is worry about what we're doing ourselves. We've had a terrific year. Our turnover year on year is going gangbusters. Our sales were fantastic. We're very happy with where we sit. So, at the end of the day, that's all we can do is worry about our own sales, and they're going very well. And we, and we thank our vendors for the support on the way through, and hopefully they continue to do so.
And I think this is a good time for another reminder. We touched on, it's too darn hot coming back this year, but they've capped his book at 101. There's one charity nomination going up for grabs via Inglis Digital next week. Chris, obviously you'd encourage any breeder that's in that position to bid for it, and a great cause, but also promises of a great return, hopefully with a good foal.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got the Too Darn Hot nomination going through on behalf for the catwalk for the Williams, Katrina and Sam Williams. So obviously the money raised for that will go to the Catwalk Foundation, which is obviously very dear to their hearts. As you said, mentioned, the horse is fully booked. You can't get a nomination, so it's your last chance. We know what a superstar he is. He's something like 10% stakes winners to runners here in the Southern Hemisphere, which is freakish stats. So, for those that have got a high end mare, but might have bought a high end mare on digital recently, and they're looking for a nomination for Too Darn Hot, the opportunity's coming.
Chris, thanks so much for your time, and all the best with the yearling inspection season.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, guys, and all the best.
A few things to cover off the wagering world this week, Tim. Apparently crafting an article, hoping to get it up the next couple of days or so, about race club sponsorships, which are an interesting, a bit of competitive element of that at the moment. Picklebet getting involved with a couple of naming rights. Entain recently taking naming rights of Bendigo. Sportsbet have been busy, as we know. So there's a few different aspects going on at the moment around that. I had a chat with Nathan Arundel, who's the Chief Commercial Officer from Sportsbet, about how they're tackling that and what's, how do you decide how you embark on race club sponsorship. So I'd urge people to have a look at that. But I guess beyond that, it's sort of interesting to look at sort of where Picklebet are playing in the market now, Tim. They're obviously a small player at the moment, but quite ambitious. And I guess you and I both looked at their new advertisement this week, probably not designed at hardcore punters. I'm not saying we're hardcore punters, but probably not designed at, people who are already within the industry like us. It's interesting to see them trying to move the market on this type of content, which is actually much more aimed at a broader audience at this time of year, Tim.
It is, I watched it with interest. It probably didn't work for me, but as you say, we're already engaged in the industry, and they're not targeting us as such. I guess they're trying to get the younger punters and people that either have only got one or two accounts or just starting to. So that's seems to be what works, that interesting content. And from a bigger picture perspective, I was only just been thinking about this before you asked the question, is, I guess to survive, you need to grow market share. And we've seen Betr trying to buy PointsBet, is Picklebet trying to get to a scale where then they can be bought out, and their initial investors do very well. That's just looking from afar, trying to see what they do. And I guess you either stay small and under the thresholds and have probably different brands, or you try and get bigger like Picklebet. And to do that, you've got to invest in marketing, which race club sponsorships, which they have, Wodonga and Warwick and a few other clubs, and then the marketing element to it.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think you're right. I think there is a play here where some of these people are going to sit there and go, well, if Betr can't get PointsBet, which is kind of looking a little bit likely at the moment, they're going to be looking around for other people that they can acquire and scoop up, and they want people with point of difference. And if marketing is going to be Picklebet's point of difference, then maybe it's an opportunity for them. Anyway, interesting times in that regard. Also interesting times with Tabcorp. They've appointed Frank Smith as their largest recruit for a new look team. He joins as Sky Racing's executive producer. Smith's got extensive experience with Channel 10, working across their various products. Also worked for Chief Entertainment and the old TVN days, Tim, a little while back. So interesting times around there. Look, the wagering industry's this couple of weeks will be interesting in itself. Tabcorp's results should be out in the next week or so. I'm hopefully having a chat to the new CEO of Entain Australia and New Zealand, Andrew Vuris, next week, which will be an article for the site. There'll also be a bunch of other stuff coming through in the next few weeks as we build up towards spring. So interesting time for the wagering space. Now on to your questions. Now, Straight Answers has been sourcing a few queries from our audience about things that they think we could be talking about. The first one here, Tim, It's no secret that Australian horse racing is rapidly losing relevance, especially among the younger generation of punters, while pokies and social media-driven gambling dominate their attention. Satirical platform like ours, this came from Racing Rumour, clearly connect with this audience, yet Racing Elite seems threatened by this approach based on the backlash/threats received. What are your thoughts? Tim, I'll let you go to start with this one. And I've
Well,
got something to say.
sorry, Bren, I'd dispute that statement. I think, sure, racing could be a lot better, and we talk about this all the time and the political machinations in the background. But the engagement in racing, I think we've covered it on the straight, I'm pretty sure, where the number of punters is still, with corporates, is still very high and similar to COVID levels, just that people are betting less. So the engagement is still there. I don't think we need to panic too much. Yes, as I say, it could be a lot better, but I don't think it's dropping off a cliff or anything like that. It is a very engaging sport. And particularly from the punting side of it, great for the brain to think about those things, but it takes time. You don't automatically, or a lot of people don't automatically become engrossed in the sport. They might be through sports betting or other sort of poker and different things, and then racing becomes their forte or their passion. And so I'm not all doom and gloom, put it that way.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go down the path of having the argument whether Benny Scarf's good or bad for racing. But what I will say is that other forms of promotion of gambling do not have to play by the same rules as racing does. So therefore, some of this influencer stuff going around playing the pokies is, borderline. It's definitely breaking regulations, definitely testing regulations, and borderline illegal. Racing can't afford to be in that space because it has to have a social license in order to operate. And if racing's seen to be overtly in that space, that case can't play the same games. And it's no different than the unregulated market, the crypto casinos and these type of people, Tim. They've got a competitive advantage because they can operate under the radar in grey areas. Racing does that, it loses its social license. It relies upon government relationships in order to give it that social license and funding. And so it's difficult for it to do that. I'm not saying it like, I don't think this is a battle of traditionalists and people who want to innovate. I think this is a notion of racing does need to evolve. We've spoken about that constantly in this show. I think that the challenge is for it to be able to do that in a way which still maintains it has to operate within the rules that it's set for itself, and it needs to do that, and that makes it difficult. Look, we operate within a set of rules here at the Straight that we have to operate within because we are journalists and we have to be, follow the basic tenets of independence, seeking both sides of the story, talking to different people. Obviously there's defamation laws and all those types of things. I often say, if we reported everything that people told us, we'd be the world's most popular site for 6 days and then be broke for a lifetime because we get sued. There's so many rumors in this industry. Doesn't mean you can report all of them. I'm not saying other people's business models are their business models, they can work it out. But from our perspective, you need to actually play that relatively, not straight, but you have to be smart with how you play that and not be in a situation where you're just putting stuff out there for the sake of it. So to question 2 now. Bren, one thing I've always been curious about is despite most of the champions of turf in Australia over the last 25 years being mares, Team Williams, to the best of my knowledge, has only ever brought male horses into the country. What is behind that thinking? Thanks, Brian Marr, for that question. You'd have to ask Nick Williams and Lloyd Williams for a precise answer on that, and I'm sure Nick's quite active on Twitter and give you plenty of replies back. But my thoughts would be that the races that they're targeting are generally staying races, and geldings have generally been better suited to that. They can also give them more time. Tim, you've spoken already about on this episode about imported mares and some of the challenges around that and residual value of those imported mares. If you're buying mares that have got profiles that are going to attract investors from Europe to buy them, it's harder to buy them, I think, than probably second level geldings out of the UK, which have minimal residual value. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah, and what is interesting that Warwick Barr did a great story last week in the Horse One Pop Award, isn't it? That I believe Debbie Kroger bred that horse. I think it's either second or third dam. She imported the mare from with Lloyd Williams, and I think she told Warwick that, or Lloyd told her breeding's for mugs and didn't want to have any part in it. And, she's gone down that path and she's got a stakes winner now on Regal Roller. So, I think long, Melbourne Cups, Cox Plates has been Lloyd's goal, and breeding them is
And he's
very,
done pretty
very
well.
difficult.
He's done pretty well with Melbourne Cups, to be fair. So I don't know
Yeah.
if you can question their strategy, albeit they spent a lot of money. But they did spend at one stage. Tim, I'd be interested to talk to. Maybe I'll get Nick on the program at some stage. Talk about they bought a lot of Zabiels very early in his sort of campaign. And they had bought a lot of horses to sort of come through in that, and that didn't really work out for them. So sometimes you got to be best. You find it in what you do best, which is probably identifying talent out of the UK from a stallion perspective that might develop into good, geldings or stallions out here, and work on that. And that seems to have worked for them pretty well.
They did have efficient.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that was probably around about that time. Last one, because we've got plenty of questions here, but we'll save a few for next week. Is Wooten Bassett overpriced, Ted?
It's supply and demand. So I'm a believer in the, it's easier for me to say it. I think 375,000. I think you don't have that many talented horses out there. Yes, they haven't won a stakes race in Australia yet, but it's only a matter of time, I think. And supply and demand, he's not a young stallion. Coolmore bought him, when he was established in France, did it the hard way. So he needs to justify bringing him out. And at the end of the day, Coolmore is a massive business. He needs to turn a profit, and to do that, he needs to stand at a big fee. He's not going to cover a huge book, I wouldn't think. I think he's 17 now. So therefore, the price restricts how many mares or breeders would support him anyway. I can't argue that he's overpriced. Do I have the budget or the mare to send to him? No, but again, supply and demand. Coolmore own the horse, and there'll be select outside mares. I'd suggest going to him.
Yeah, he is 17. And I guess the other point is people say, well, he hasn't done, his horses have underperformed to date in Australia in terms of that Coolmore crop. I don't think they've the 2-year-old profile was never going to be their strength, but their record from those Coolmore conceived crops in the UK is extraordinary. And Ireland, like they've had, I think, 6 Group 1 winners from that first crop. So they seem as an elite presence. And it's a little bit like the argument saying, Galileo was a flop out of here. Well, he was, but he wasn't really. If you look at his numbers, they weren't that bad. They just weren't as ridiculously good as what they were. Now, Jabawi didn't work out in Australia, and he's an unbelievably influential sire. So there's so many of those horses you could sit there and go, whatever else. Now, it's up to people that want to pay that much. But what I will say is that the demand for his yearlings at the yearling sale would indicate that's what he's worth. Whether he warrants that for the fact he's a champion stallion yet. No, he's not in Australia, but he's wait till his 3-year-olds come through this season. People want to come out and knock him. They can probably knock him next year if he doesn't get a star horse in Australia. But I'm tipping by this time next year, Tim, we'll be saying that there might be a couple of Group 1 winners next to Wooten Bassett's name. That'd be my theory anyway. Thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by our fabulous sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast, and be sure to subscribe. There's plenty of places you can listen to us. You can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us on Apple, Podbean, Spotify, and a variety of other platforms. So make sure you get all that. Send us an email, editor@thestraight.com.au, or send us a tweet at the Straight on X to let us know what you'd like us to talk about. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk to you again next week.